Hi, everyone. It's Sarah from the Support Worker Store. Today, I've got Nicole. Nicole, you're from Empowered Livability. I'm so excited to have you. Haha, I got you. Now, I'm just going to get straight into it. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself, Nicole?
Yeah, for sure. Thank you so much for having me. There's so much to tell, I guess. Career-wise, I guess I've been in the community services sector for about 25 years. I think I started when I was 20. I thought I wanted to do law, and very quickly, once sort of going to uni and going, into actually working in firms, I found out very quickly that wasn't for me, and sort of fell into community services when a family friend was, had a small agency, and very much fell in love straight away. I knew that it was exactly where I needed to be. But yeah, so I'm a mum. I've got an 11-year-old who is, we were just talking about, very much a character. He's a very funny kid. He's autistic, ADHD, PDA, dyspraxic, jokingly calls himself the alphabet because he keeps getting a new diagnosis every time he goes to the doctors. But very, yeah, very funny musical kid. So that's, obviously a huge, huge part of my life. And yeah, a wife, a trainer, a counselor, business owner, a bit of everything. But yeah, thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited.
Ah, I can't wait because I've got a heap of questions that and I'm sure many other people would love to ask you. We just never have. So I want to take this back a couple of steps. You said that you studied and then you went into a disability based business. If you don't mind me asking, was it a few moons ago? Was it like, where did it all start?
Yeah, so as I said, I did an advanced diploma in business legal practice, which was my back door into becoming a lawyer. But after doing that, I sort of went into working in legal firms and accounting firms and just absolutely hated it. I hated that corporate environment. It was so fake and just was not me. I've come from a very salt of the earth kind of background, family wise. Growing up in Geelong, we're a very, I guess, very salt of the earth town, very country beach, if you could sort of sum up Geelong people. But yeah, so went into a family friend's business who was doing support work, went in there to do some support work, and very quickly they realized that I had admin skills that they thought that they could use, which was great. But I did a lot of support work working with people who were actually moving into housing. I think it was DHS and Urella and Scope who had done a collaboration many, this is 25 years ago, moving people into their own kind of villas, I would say, that were accessible. And I was super excited just to help people move and to help them move their furniture around so that they could get in and get around the house. And it just very much sparked, I guess, that interest of accessibility, probably for one. But I probably quickly learned personal care was never gonna be for me. I just, as a 20-year-old girl, it just was not my thing at the time, but I loved that kind of, in the old school, what would have been our kind of class as community access. I loved that kind of stuff, and I loved the really, I guess, I loved working with people who other people either didn't want to work with or couldn't work with well, and sort of working with them to find out what they really wanted. And it was, I guess now, and I've had many conversations about this now, kind of the real starts of that, personalized support and, that really first stages of independent living of people moving into villas by themselves out of kind of institutional care. And that was more from TAC. So it was people who had acquired disabilities. So yeah, absolutely found my passion very, very quickly. And, 25 years later, I'm still here and evolving and still learning.
Well, you said something that was really interesting. I hope you don't mind. You talked about the big three, some really big three providers in, say, in Victoria, Melbourne, that you were at the beginning of your career. I worked for one of them, and I will say that I'm now, and I clicked over the other day at work, I'm now 17 and something years in the sector, and I worked for one of the big three, and the skills that I had learned from working with them, I still carry today, 17 years later. Is there any skill sets that you have developed from working for one of the big three?
Yeah, well, I was working for an independent, smaller agency at the time, but we were contracted out to most of those big providers in Victoria. So we worked with Melbourne Submission, Ecto, which used to be Win Support back in those days, obviously Scope, Urella, Jellybrand, lots of those kind of bigger services. And I think one of the big things that I took from them was that they were always learning and evolving, no matter what, you know, I guess even from a, 100-year-old kind of industry where we've learned that there's been a lot of abuse and neglect, and a lot of those big older providers were part of that. But I think what I've seen from them and that the rest of us have kind of taken is that they were always, no matter how bad things were, they always wanted to do better. And the people on the ground always wanted to do better. And they only ever wanted to weed out the bad seeds that weren't doing good support. And I think that's something I always took, always they, as much as there's been, I guess, negative in, and I'm not pinpointing any of those providers, but there's always been negative talk about some of those older providers that were they were the stalwarts of the sector. Be like that anymore. We want to keep moving forward and evolving and making sure the people that we work with have dignity, respect, independence, all of those things that those providers definitely stand for now. And I think that's something I always took on, that no matter what happened, take responsibility, move forward, and just constantly improving and doing better. So I think that's probably the biggest thing I took from kind of being around those big providers.
My God, the skill sets that I have now, I'm still using, and that's 17 years later. The To be
Absolutely.
able to continue to use that and have those skill sets and to benefit, it had shaped me career wise by working for them for a short period of time. So yeah, like kudos in that way. The skill set, you
Yeah,
can't go past it.
exactly.
Did you always so once you were doing your support work as a one-to-ones and in the agency and doing the transition into homes, was there a moment that, or like a person that you worked with where you're like, haha, I have found my calling, like this is it. Like I have feeling this. Like, did you have an aha moment when you were working with someone?
Yeah, definitely. And I think it was actually two people probably almost simultaneously within about a year of each other. And they were both vocational educational trainers, both very much became mentors to me, especially around that continuous improvement kind of stuff and the how important education is for people working in the sector. And definitely I think pushed me to go further. They must have seen something in me, potentially from a lived experience point of view, or just that, that unconditional positive regard that they, both of them really hammered home all of the time. And they both really inspired me to want to do more and to always, I guess, kind of hold education and knowledge and experience really, really high with anyone I work with. So whether that's for myself, always trying to learn more, constantly doing more courses, more workshops, more qualifications, but also offering that to my team, no matter what that team was. So from a support work team, that was constantly trying to upskill staff all of the time. But even now, sort of moving more into the housing space and having more of a, I guess, more of a social work support coordinator, like tenancy management kind of team rather than direct care workers, is to constantly be offering that training and building our own training so that we're then not just educating our own team, but educating the sector as well.
Consistently wanting to grow and develop.
Yeah. And I think it's learning, not even just in the traditional sense of, training and workshops and education, but I think learning from, as we just said about older providers, learning from their mistakes as much as learning from what they've done well. So, wanting to make sure, and this has even come from, working in a corporate environment of never really wanting that environment for my workplace, that, we wanted a bit more of a relaxed environment where you can still be professional, but you don't have to be over the top ridiculous, and that people can bring, and something that I've kind of always pushed for, but to bring themselves to the environment, that there is a bit of a seamless transition sometimes between home life and work life. And that as much as we say that they should be kind of, both of them should be left at the door, I think that's kind of bullshit, to be honest. I think no matter what, if crap's going on at home, you're bringing it to work. And if crap's going on at work, you're bringing it home. And I think just owning that and kind of wearing your heart on your sleeve, because if people don't know what you're going through, they can't support you. So, I think that's something that I've always, from a workplace point of view, is that if you need support, whether it's at work or home, you need support. So, let's kind of work together to work that out.
Well, it's a people business. And when I talk about this, when I say it's a people business, our main job for the people that we serve is to turn up and be a person, not a robot. And we
Yeah,
can't do that unless we're not our authentic self in that sense, or we're a bit down to earth. It's easier to communicate with people when we're all on the same level field of playing.
exactly. Exactly.
Now, you said that your son plays a huge part in the work that you do. Can you tell me a little bit more?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, obviously, I was already in community services in general. prior to having him. So he's 11 now, and I've been in the sector 25 years. But I think he's definitely shaped the way that I look at the work that I do. It's probably shaped the way that I support carers. From whether they're parents, siblings, children looking after parents. I think it's definitely shaped that. And I think for me, from as a housing provider, it's also made me look at our housing to see if this is something that I would want for my child as they grow up and as they're becoming more independent and moving out on their own. Is this the type of property or the type of location or services around that property that I would want for him? So I think it's definitely influenced and helped me grow, I guess, as a mum, but as a leader and as a service provider as well. Looking at how we show up, you know, with everyone that we work with, and knowing that whether it is a parent that, is having to put their child or guess support their child into more independent living as they're growing up, that counselling part of actually working with the parents on how to help them let go and cut the apron string a little bit, but also understanding from a parent's point of view how unbelievably difficult that would be, but also knowing that they need that independence as much as their adult child does as well. So yeah, absolutely massive part of kind of who I am and what I do and why I show up the way that I do.
I feel like there's a lot there to unpack because I like when it comes to being a provider and being a mum now, you do look at things a little bit differently. And am I okay to walk past this situation? Would I be okay to have my loved one in care? It does open that can of worms for you. And like it does make you question what you're doing and how we're doing it.
Absolutely. And it makes you question, for us, I guess, from Empowered being a housing provider, we work with a lot of care providers that are providing on site supports. And when I have families say, because a lot of the time I'm very honest about, being a mum and having a child, who has a disability as well. One of the first questions I get, would you put your child in this house with this provider? And I think that that's probably, rather than having to have the difficult conversation around that, I just make sure that we're working with quality providers so that that question is always a yes. I would never want to go, oh, I don't know. I'm not sure I would trust them. I think if I wouldn't trust them with my kid, then they're not going to be someone I would trust in our house. And as much as we have to obviously uphold choice and control, and we want participants to choose their own still, there's still that level of even pushing back sometimes on the participant to say, "Are you sure about this provider?" If 100%, we'll go ahead with them. But if we have concerns, we'll voice those concerns very early on.
How do you weed them out? Because I'll be honest, I'm generally a friendly person, but sometimes I find it really difficult to weed out and pick who is all talk and who isn't. And there's so many providers to choose from. Do you have a method to weeding out people or providers that you believe are you deem as not the best choice for a person?
Yeah, I think, one of the things that we do, we have a bit of a filtering system anyway. And part of that is to push back on the provider to say, here's our kind of, not really an application, but basically a process that we require you to go through that will show what your management team is like, what your backup, if something, obviously COVID helped us with this, but if everyone goes down on and needs to go off because of COVID, what's your backup plan? What's your on-call system? Really wanting to make sure that we've got really good relationships with those providers. And I think luckily enough, us being a bit of a thorn in their side helps them move on very quickly anyway. And they will decide that they don't want the level of oversight that we actually kind of insist on, because we're there to ensure that participants are safe and we want that transparency between housing and supports. And unless we're a pain in the ass, unfortunately, that is where abuse and neglect is still going to go to hide. So we're quite proud of being pains in the ass that are actually going to put that back on a provider to show what they're capable of and what they're actually going to do and how they're going to support people and uphold choice and control. And they, funnily enough, fall off pretty quickly if they're not okay with that or they don't want that scrutiny.
Pains in the ass, or we just have a benchmark that we believe that should be met. I don't know if you're a pain in the ass. I think you've just got expectations that to be met that a person requires. Like I don't see
Yeah.
that as a pain in the ass.
I think that we call it out. Like, we're very good at calling ourselves out. So we know sometimes that we are going to be painful for some providers, because again, if you're not doing the right thing, we are going to be painful. So we're quite proud of our pain in the ass, kind of system.
Is it
And,
pain is it pain in the ass or non-negotiables? Because I do believe that there are non-negotiables that have to go with it. You can call it pain in the ass, but there is this non-negotiable that, you know what? I expect X, Y, and Z when supporting this person, and the reason why is because this is the expectation of quality care. I hear a lot of people call the word quality care, but I haven't, like, I don't know if it is like it's an easy word to say, one to actually commit to and tick the box there. I don't know. No, yeah,
yeah, and I think it is I think it is a little bit of both. I think because of choice and control, sometimes if people can talk a big game, they can talk families and participants into thinking that they are the best provider for them. And they may be. And, we try and give everyone the benefit of the doubt. Someone who may have been a not good a provider for one person may be fantastic for another person. So you still want to make sure we're upholding that choice and control. It's just that we would put extra measures in place if we didn't have a good gut feel about a provider. And then it's usually then when they're not doing the right thing is that they feel like we're not the right provider to collaborate with, and we're okay with that. So I'd say that that's probably, where we kind of sit.
you got to kiss a couple of frogs. It happens.
Yeah.
But do you think it's from the experience that you've gained? Because at one point you went from being a case manager to a director, and then you jumped into your own baby, your own business.
Yeah, so that first provider that I started working for with the family friend, that actually I became sort of moved through the ranks from kind of reception admin to, rostering to then, sort of care management, and did support coordination and case management. And then that company was actually going under, and myself and my business partner at the time decided to take over the business. I was only 27 or something at the time. Because I didn't, as it was going kind of into administration, my biggest question was, well, what will happen to the participants? What will happen to the staff? And the administrator said that, like, just nothing. And I'm like, what do you mean nothing? Who's going to get them out of bed tomorrow morning? And they're like, that's not our problem. And I said, we'll buy it right now. I don't care. And so we took it over. Absolutely. I was completely out of my depth, had no idea how to run a company, probably always learned how to bite off more than I can chew, and then learned how to chew later. And that was definitely that. So that company became Wingate Care. So I've had Wingate for nearly 20 years now. And from that, I guess, again, from my own mistakes, learning, what staff want, what participants want, always seeing lots of people falling through the gaps from a housing perspective. I very much questioned, why were people getting put into really horrible, horrible hotels, motels, caravan parks, hostels, obviously aged care and hospital settings, and just couldn't understand why there wasn't a better system. And I think from there, I think NDIS was just kicking off, and I just had my little guy. So I spent a lot of nights breastfeeding and reading legislation. That was kind of my 3 a.m. fun mum introduction. And that's where, SDA was just being introduced. So specialist disability accommodation was just rolling out. And I kind of had a bit of an epiphany at the same time. So my sister, who had become the care manager of Wingate, actually suffered a spinal cord injury from a prolapse disc, and was being sort of paralyzed, in real time. And as she was being rolled into surgery, I kind of had this moment of, what am I going to do? How do I help her? She'd just purchased her own home that was the most inaccessible little cottage that you could possibly think of. And I knew that if she was coming out in a wheelchair, there was no chance she was going home. Luckily, the surgery went well, and she had to go to aged care for her rehab. But I sort of had promised, I guess, to myself or the universe or whoever you kind of believe in, that I was going to do something about that. That young people, she was just over 30, I think, at the time. So young people shouldn't be going to aged care for rehab, or, not being able to go home if that's where they should be. And sort of did some research, spoke to a lot of Geelong people who I know had been quite prolific in kind of accessible housing. And that's when, yeah, as I said, that kind of burning the midnight candle and finding SDA was kind of, I don't know, I think if when people used to choose to be nuns and they'd have that apparently divine thing happen was almost what I had. It could have been some new mum delirium, I think it was really. But, yeah, I knew that that was kind of my calling, and I thought this is where I need to actually, head next. And then created this most random kind of little video PowerPoint presentation to send to a couple of friends who Goro, who had been like a property strategist who I'd been sort of talking about doing a kind of investment property with, and Joseph, who worked for him, who was like a project manager of normal builds. And I sent it to them at 1 o'clock at night saying, this is what I want to do. Can you guys help me? I want people with disabilities to own their own home. I've researched it. I've
Yep.
read every bit of legislation. It's just kicking off. No one else is really doing it yet.
Yep.
And then I think I met with them the next day. They were already in tears from the video that I sent them, and just they were on board. And I thought it was going to be this little side thing to Wingate where I'd do one house, they would do the housing, I'd do the supports, and that would be it. And then the next thing I knew, again, a bit of mum delirium. Next thing I knew, we had 25 houses being built that we'd somehow got invested. No, it was pretty, yeah, it was a bit. It was crazy. It was crazy. I knew I was persuasive, but I didn't know I was quite that persuasive. But yeah, like somehow we had to fill 25 houses in one go. But again, guess the luck of the draw was that no one else was doing it. So it was a little bit easier back then, 9 years ago to fill houses, to work directly. We worked directly with Genu and Jelly Brown were our first two kind of providers. Um, they were going to take 10 houses each and we're all working together to try and fill them. And they helped with the designs and that sort of stuff. And somehow those houses are still kicking around, still stacking up, still probably bigger than half the housing being built now. But we're a little bit more old school with the massive bathroom for two people to shower, someone in a shower bed, compared to kind of the en suites and stuff that we have now. But yeah, it was a wild, very, very wild ride, those first 25 houses that I thought was just going to be one little side one from Wingate doing some support. So
You know what? I
crazy
think you
tight.
just nailed on the head. I haven't met a founder yet that wasn't a little bit delusional.
Oh, yeah. I was delusional and delirious. So, you combine the two.
But
And
it's
yeah,
from a
somehow,
crazy idea that it expands itself. Like it's only from
yeah,
like these pivotal moments, like you said, 1 a.m. in the morning, that you can build and create an idea because it annoyed you enough that you knew that you had to do something. It's like a point of
yeah,
call.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, a little bit of
What
delirium, a little bit of crazy, and somehow we have built a business from that.
I feel like every founder that I've spoken to has said the same thing. So you are not alone. I think we all just put our hands up and say, yeah, I did that. That was me. I own that. But it does. I feel like the point of your story when you were talking about your sister wondering, what will happen next. And that element of like, right, there's a problem, there is a calling. I need to serve. I can do it. Well, nobody else is going to do it, so I'm it. Let's go. I
Yeah,
don't see this as some sort of like money profit spinning machine. It was a real duty to serve, to make sure that people did have a home to live in. Because
yeah,
when you build these houses, you're building houses, but you're really creating a home environment for an individual to live there, not for now, but for decades to go. Like that's something quite special in itself.
definitely. Yeah, for sure. And I think that, that upbringing of always being told if it's meant to be, it's up to me. I think I've always just, no matter what I do, I've always taken that on board. I'm not sort of one that sits back and doesn't sort of roll up my sleeve and have a crack at pretty much everything. I think that very much was, I guess I saw the problem and thought, I can't see anybody else really doing anything about it. I think Young Care and Summer Foundation had just kind of started kicking off as well, and they were very much sort of doing apartments, and I sort of felt that that wasn't really our niche, and we went down that very first 1 to 3 ratio, because the participants that I actually had that needed housing at the time very much needed that 1 to 3 ratio. They were super, super high medical needs, and they were not able to live in an apartment or anything like that. And their families all really wanted a family environment, and they wanted it to feel like a family environment. And they still do. That very first participant, who we talk about quite a bit in our kind of, I guess, our origin story or whatever you would want to call it. Eddie had been in an aged care sort of hospital setting for a long time, and he was quite young. I think he wasn't even 30. And his family really wanted a family environment in his community where he grew up, right in the middle smack bang of his two sisters and his parents. And they still to this day are around there every week. They're having games nights with him. They very much, built a family environment for that house and for the participants in that house to have Christmases together, to have Easters together. It's just, it's been something that I think, again, that's still the old house. It's still the same house that he's in. He's the first participant that moved in. Um, and I think for me, that's probably one of the biggest, I guess, success stories to know that that family were able to have their son back home. They weren't traveling every single day to visit him. He's 5 minutes away from all of them now, and they're able to keep that family environment for him, which is what they really wanted.
That story would probably make a lot of people want to cry because you really had an opportunity to develop a whole life approach. It wasn't just a house approach. It is a whole life approach because you've got family nearby. It's accessible. You're in a community that you lived in and you can continue to live in. That's quite a special story about Eddie.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Ed, I still get goosebumps when I think about, when we first, so Wingate had actually started working with Eddie, prior to us sort of starting Empowered Livability. So, we were sending two staff, I think, every day into the aged care setting to work with him because he was so medically high needs. And I think just that, I guess that kind of affinity with the family, and I'd sort of told them, I think this is what I want to do housing wise. And they said, look, we're in. If you find something that's in our community, we will move Eddie to that place. And true to their word, they were able to choose the SIL provider that they wanted. And I think they've, in that sort of couple of years, I think he's been there 8 years or something now, 7 or 8 years, but they've probably chosen 3 or 4 different SIL providers over that period of time. That big bathroom that now everyone would complain about, in reality in the new market, is perfect for him because he's showered in a shower bed, and, he needs that level of support. But I think the family probably pushed me along to make that a reality just as much as, my sister's kind of spinal cord injury. And I think the two of them kind of really go hand in hand
Yeah.
of the reason why I kind of really stepped into that housing kind of space, and why that's become my absolute passion now over kind of everything else.
So with the people that you serve, like your sister and Eddie in particular, it means that you would have had some really big, challenging moves to make as a leader without breaking any confidentiality whatsoever. What was the biggest challenge for you?
I think the biggest thing that I realized very quickly, that Empowered was not going to be this little side thing that I thought it was going to be with, one house and providing supports. Even that at the time was probably just going to be a big challenge anyway, like going from direct sort of community access home care into kind of what would have been a SIL space, back then, like very early SIL space. That would have been a big enough challenge anyway. But to realize very quickly that that was not going to be the case, and that this was going to be far bigger than anything I'd ever done before. The hardest part was actually letting go of Wingate and my leadership there, and being able to trust kind of the team that I'd built to take that on and keep that going, and still continue, maybe not to grow as vastly as we had in those years before, but to keep maintaining, while I thought I was just going to be, over here doing this other little thing, and I'd be back. And I think that was probably the hardest thing. And I think that, though, has then probably prepared me, 8, 9 years later, to then be able to look at Empowered in the same light and look at the team. We've grown from the three of us, myself, Goro, and Joe, building that company with no money, no clients, no houses, nothing, completely bootstrapping that, putting our own kind of funds into, to kick it off, um, to then building to now a team of 16, but being able to kind of move other people into leadership roles to free me up to then look at the bigger picture again, and look at where, our next phase potentially will be. And I think, yeah, that's probably the biggest thing, is being able to trust in the team and just say, okay, I'm throwing you guys in the deep end. I'm still here with the life raft on the side, but you guys are going to sink or swim. And seeing people who you've worked with developed, kind of hopefully nurtured into that leadership role, absolutely not just swim, but do backstroke and synchronized swimming, is just like mind blowing in itself. But yeah, that's probably been the hardest thing, is just to let go as a leader and not be so operational, but moving really more into that leadership kind of space.
How do you get, because it's your baby, this is your company, your baby. How do you get your employees to love your business the way that you love it?
I think some of it's luck, but I think it's good hiring decisions as well. And sometimes hiring people who I have just had probably such alignment with, and they maybe didn't have the skills yet and just needed, some upskilling and nurturing. But really looking at that culture, we've got a really amazing culture at Empowered, and it's probably something I never got to build at Wingate because everyone's so out on the floor, working in different houses. They barely see each other, let alone, see us as a management team. So having that opportunity to build a culture that we're really, really proud of. Like I mentioned before, there almost with most of the team isn't much difference between house and work. Like there's literally everyone brings their stuff, everyone wears their heart on their sleeve. Everyone knows when something's going on with someone and we back each other up and we support each other. That's really, really hard to build in a team. And it's taken a long, long time. And there's been, people that have worked with us along the way that haven't necessarily had that same, I wouldn't say the same mindset, but I'd say they haven't had that 100% buy-in, whereas I think, we've got people who have only been with us for a year or two that are so hardly bought in that it's almost a little bit, I don't know, maybe it's a little bit sort of cult-like in some weird way, but not, not in a bad way, but they are so on board and love what they do and are really passionate about what they do and believe in what we're trying to do and believe in that we're trying to, even when we stuff up, that we're always trying to improve and we're always kind of owning it and putting our hands up and going, shit, we stuffed that up. Let's do better. How do we fix this? I think that that's something that's really, really special, but really, really hard to build.
Yep. Oh, 100%. And then how do you, so there's an element that you do have to keep business because we need to keep things in line to make it operational and keep running and running and running smoothly. But then you've got the element of having care for the people that we serve. How do you balance the two to make sure that one never overshadows the other? Or in like, I don't know, I'm old school, so I kind of feel like maybe, care here and the balance. You do you. You tell me which one which
Yeah,
one works.
yeah. I don't think I've ever truly found a really perfect balance. I think again, I learned very, very early. And this again could have been from working in accounting and law firms where this was not even thought of, I don't think. But if you look after your people, they will look after their people. And I think that's probably something that we've done, I hope, really well, is that we look after our team and that again gives them that buy-in and that passion and that loyalty. They like our staff are like acrobats, the way that they bend over backwards for their participants. And it's not even just the participants, it's the participants' families, it's the SIL providers, it's the support coordinators, the OTs, the community access teams. Like every participant almost has about 10 people around them that you need to build a relationship with. And I think that because we build such good relationships with our team, it's just that overflow of them then going out and building amazing relationships with everyone that they work with. So I think that's probably been the balance. And I think going from being someone who I was that person. So I was always the person who was building those relationships with those participants and their families and everybody around them, their care teams. And that's probably how we built. That's how I built Wingate, and it's how I initially built Empowered. But being able to again slowly hand those off to other people who I trust, again meant that I had to have people around me that I really trusted each participant with. And now those people probably just like, oh, how's Nicole going? But they're so like before they were like, I don't want to speak to anybody else. I trust Nicole and I know what she has done, to make this work. Now I'm almost, which is great. Again, you want to be someone who's able to be replaced, and to be able to replace yourself, but it is hard. Like it is hard to let go, and ensure that the people that you're entrusting your participants to, that you trust 100%, so that then the participants trust them 100%. And I think that's all. That's probably the only balance I've been able to get right. I don't think I do anything else very well from a balance perspective. I certainly don't do self-care very well, but it is something I kind of harp on about more to the team, and I have tried to be better with in recent times because again, if I'm not going to walk the walk with self-care, then they're not going to either. So I think that that's something that I have very much as I get older, that wisdom's starting to kick in at the same time as the body's starting to kick out. So I think that's been pretty lucky.
We did some shady stuff 20 years ago when it came to personal care. There's no roll mat stuff back in my day.
Yeah.
But
And our bodies are now failing.
Yeah, well, we don't have the technology that we have now that makes it so much easier to support somebody. So
Exactly.
I get it.
Exactly.
Now, as you're in this phase of, you're slowly handing over the keys at points, did you have to, like, do you take mentorship that you give to your staff members? Is that something that you do, or is that something that just comes naturally, or do you mentor other people outside of your business?
Yeah, I probably do more mentoring almost outside of the business, probably to more younger people getting into sort of that SIL space or support coordination space. I've done a bit of business coaching and stuff over the years as well. But again, as Empowered's got bigger, that's sort of almost become a bit impossible. So I do try to spend that time mentoring where I can. But I think the difference over the last few years is where originally I was hiring people that needed that mentorship, that needed my kind of holding hand in that early stages. And again, as you grow and as you get better, you start realizing that you're going to have to try and build a business that brings on people that, has that talent acquisition that are ready to go and ready to hit the ground running. So my mentorship, I hope, is more probably lead by example now rather than, sort of that one to one. And it's more that I've got team around me that now are being mentors to the rest of the team, which I think has worked really well for us. But yeah, I hope, you know, I'm kind of always there if anyone has a question or if anyone, has a curly thing happening with a participant wherever they work, whether it's another SDA provider or any other provider, I hope that they would always feel like they could reach out. I've always tried to be someone that can help where I can. So yeah, but I would love to kind of be freed up more to do a lot more of that mentoring, definitely.
You said something quite interesting that you have been able to hire people with different skill sets that come with different talents. So it made it quite easy. This sector is really hard to hire people, look, to be honest with you, because there's not that many people that have got the skill sets that you need. How do you source out these amazing people to hire? Where are you finding them? Because I'm sure a lot of providers out there would like to know.
Definitely. I think early on, when we first started looking for tenancy managers in this space with disability experience and housing experience, they didn't really exist because nobody had really, I guess, in this space had actually had to deal with more from a real estate point of view than a care provision point of view. And we really wanted to be, I guess, a provider who always was a disability provider who happened to have to do real estate rather than, a lot of other providers have come from that real estate or development background trying to do disability. So I think, the first lot of our staff, and a lot of them are still around, they've come from either working with Wingate as support workers and eventually, moving up sort of team leaders type people that have then come over to Empowered and stayed and nurtured and built their skill set from there. But I would say, and I've never experienced this before until probably the last couple of years, it was always us trying to find people and trying to get the right people. We've almost tipped into a bit of a provider of choice when it comes to employment. So we have now a lot more people coming to us and saying, we love your culture. We love what you do. We love your passion. We love that you guys wear your heart on your sleeve. We want to work with you. Do you have anything coming up? So the last couple of hires have been a little bit more on that side, which has been amazing. Some of our team I've known for 20 odd years because I've worked with them and kept in touch with them wherever they worked. And other people have come on board that we had no prior experience with. We just got a really great vibe from them, and they've come to fill probably more roles that we haven't. We've come from a very disability grassroots background as a organization, and having to have more very polished financial people and marketing and that business acumen has been something different to me. And I've still wanted people who either have lived experience of disability, have a disability themselves, or very much have worked in the sector for a long period of time, because everything we do, whether it's finance, whether it's maintenance, whatever it is, has to have that disability lens first. So that's been something that's been really important to our entire team, is to make sure that people understand it from that side.
Can you give me an example of somebody giving you an employee that would like to work for you, giving you a good vibe and a bad vibe?
Yeah, I think I've probably seen it over the years. I think people that are a bit too presumptuous or too cocky and just assumed that they were gonna fit into our team and never made any kind of effort to, even before, like, and never got through the door anyway. So I think there's been that kind of vibe. And then there's just been people who straight away have come in, they either have a disability or have kids with disabilities or family members with disabilities who just get what we're about and straight away are so passionate that you see them. Most people would see them, they probably think we're weirdos because we're all sharing our stuff over every social media because everyone just is really passionate about what we do, and we're quite unapologetic about it. Like, we don't kind of care what other people are saying about us, or any of that stuff doesn't really phase most of our team. It's just like, no, we are what we are, we do what we do, we love what we do, and we love each other, and we'll support each other, and we don't care how weird we look doing it. So yeah, I think it's just that kind of, those people just tend to vibe with the rest of us and just fit in completely seamlessly.
Yeah. So this to be able to hire somebody and to build a team, it does take a couple of stuff ups. It does take some real learning curves. Did you have to get a mentor yourself or a business coach yourself to be able to build these skill sets to be able to grow your team?
Yeah, definitely. I've had some amazing business coaches over the years, and done some amazing sort of business course coaches. Oh, sorry, business coaching courses. A lot of them have been quite female leader based for me. I feel the disability sector, there is so many direct care support workers and, probably was support coordinators, I would say, and OTs that were very feminine based, but leadership roles were very masculine based. We're starting to see a little bit of a shift in that, but I still see a lot of, it's hard to say without being politically incorrect, but there is a lot of people who have not done a thing in this space that have just waltzed in and become support coordinators without any real background. And I feel a lot of that is the males in the space, whereas the females in the space have been the people who have done the hard yards for 20 years and then decided, oh, maybe I've got the skills to be a support coordinator, or maybe I've got the skills to be a team leader. There's no, I think there's a lot of imposter syndrome with females. And that's amazing that males are a little bit more confident in that kind of sense, which is great for them. And again, that's me just completely being stereotypical and un-PC, but this is purely just anecdotal of what I actually see. And then I see a lot of
Yep.
the CEOs, the CFOs, and the COOs are all male, and a lot of them have been in the sector for under 3-4 years. And then I see, women such as Belinda from Including You, or there's so many others who have been in the sector for so long, and unless we run our own businesses, we're not even thought of really as leaders. So a lot of that coaching for me has been around how to also build amazing female leaders around me. Our
Yep.
COO and our CFO are both females and both incredible, strong, empathetic women. And they weren't put in those positions because they were females. They were put in their positions because they were absolutely the right people for those roles. But yeah, most of the coaching I've done has been around how to step into my own, I guess, confidence around what I've done, and my lived experience. And, I don't have necessarily lived experience of disability. I have what I call loved experience of disability with my son and with other family members. I call that kind of more from a carer's perspective, loved experience. My lived experience has been more around mental health and drug and alcohol and trauma. That's very much my lived experience. But yeah, I think there are so many people in the space that have that real lived experience, male or female or other, I'll say, that have that lived experience but have those leadership qualities that with a little bit of mentoring, a little bit of coaching, a little bit of extra qualifications and experience could absolutely step up to be amazing CEOs, CFOs, ops managers, whatever it is.
I agree with you. 100%. And the reason why is that if I go back to the very beginning of my career, and I remember doing some training, and all the support workers around me were female. So I was like, oh, yeah, cool. Like, rows and rows of female support workers surrounding me. And the people on stage were all male. And I remember sitting there, 19-year-old Sarah, going, what the fuck? Like, how is it that I've got all these confident women around me and they're not running the training? Like, why? Like, it doesn't add up. Like, it doesn't make any sense because you would have thought if this is a numbers game, at least one or two of you should be up there sitting amongst it doing the training or, presenting the training because you know this sector so well. You've been here long enough. You're quite intelligent and smart. Like, I always found that fascinating. And I remember being like 19-year-old Sarah going, what the fuck? Yeah. But
Yeah, and
then,
I don't
then
think it's an inherently male or female issue. Like, I don't think it's, males getting more opportunity or females getting less. I think a lot of it, from what I see, again, this is purely just from my own personal perspective, I just see a lot of women who don't have the confidence, have that imposter syndrome of, "Oh, I possibly couldn't know enough," when they are so knowledgeable and so experienced and so incredible. And as leaders, often, their empathy and unconditional positive regard is just natural in a lot of people. So I don't, and I think there's still that old school mentality of unless women are over childbearing years, that they're not getting those opportunities in those leadership because it's assumed that they're going to stop and go have kids anyway, and then they'll just have to come back lower again or whatever the case is. And I'm sure these conversations I've had with many women in the space, around how they think they've been looked over sometimes, and sometimes they haven't actually been looked over. They just haven't even put themselves forward at all, which I think is a huge shame. So I think, that imposter syndrome stuff needs to get in the bin.
yep.
We need to really,
Oh,
have that confidence.
it is that, but then there's that element of difficult woman. I don't know if you've ever heard the term that, I myself have been at times labeled difficult when expressing advocating for somebody else that, are just being difficult when really I'm just, it's black and white. This doesn't sit right.
Yeah,
Uh,
absolutely. I 100% probably many, many times too emotional as a leader. I'll cry in a team meeting if I'm getting emotional about something, and that's embarrassing sometimes, and some people can't handle that. But I would say at the same time, it's probably one of my better qualities as a leader is that I can show those emotions and I can open the door for our team. Emotion in the moment is probably one of my better qualities as a leader. And I see a lot of that from, whatever the case is. But I think it shouldn't be about the sex or the gender of somebody, or it shouldn't just be about let's tick all the boxes on quotas and things like that. I think emotional intelligence and being able to be open with that side of yourself and open with your team is what makes a great leader.
yes, 100%, because it means that you're human,
Yeah,
and that's
exactly.
the
And we're
part
in
of
human
care.
services. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah.
So now, I'm snoopy. I am nosy as fuck, and I will admit that. Like, I think I've said that at every podcast. Sarah is nosy as fuck. So I'll continue that and say Sarah is nosy as fuck. And I was watching one of the videos of the houses that you are about to open, and it got me questioning what makes a good house so important for the people that we serve.
Look, I think for us, and it's something that we've kind of hung our hat on as a team, is we know that most people who are moving into whether it's specialist disability accommodation or straight sill or, other types of disability housing, a lot of the time they don't just have 10, 15 grand sitting around to spend on fridges and washing machines and dryers and microwaves and kettles and toasters and that side of thing. Very early on, we ensured that every one of our houses had all of those white goods put in. That's extended now, where we furnish all of the main living areas, but it's very participant led as well. Unless we know no one's scheduled to move in yet, and we're going to furnish a whole house to make it look pretty, and there's not a lot of consultation because there's no participants necessarily chosen yet. If participants are chosen, then we work with them to see what do you want to bring of your own stuff? Is there any gaps in what you have? Are you good with your furniture, your bedroom? Because we can add a few little bits and pieces if you don't have things. Have you got your recliner that you want to put in the lounge? Whatever the case is, we kind of work around that. But I think for us, and I was literally just saying this the other day, we had a house that I just did not care for. There was nothing special about it. It was a very bland kind of house. It was in an average area. And for whatever reason, I just couldn't work out in my head how we were going to make this house feel like a home. And the amount of work and a lot of it is generally me kind of saying, how would I turn this house into a home? What would I be comfortable living in? What would my, family be comfortable living in? And we've explored over the years, and we've done it here and there of using other people's furniture packs, and they just go in and do everything for you, but it still feels clinical. It doesn't feel like there's a lot of thought behind actually turning a house into a home. So I think for us, that is that first step of doing everything we can. And literally, this is literally last week. Our Geelong tenancy manager, Tanya, was literally mowing the front nature strip and weeding because she wanted to make sure if anyone looks through the house, it felt homely straight away. I had my dad with me and, our maintenance guy, Jaden. They were moving furniture around for me, putting things up on the wall. And like, it's a real community around us that wants to get in and make these, like, my dad's proud as punch that we've done this and that we've built empowered. And he puts his hand up to go, I'll put furniture together, or I'll, do this and that, or I'll go out and help here and there. Like, we've been out and it was literally my mum, dad, and my husband and I. We had some participants moving in a robust house, and we went out and double paled all of the fencing, just to make sure that the guys that were moving in couldn't jump the fence and get out and be unsafe because the builders hadn't even thought, like, it wasn't even thought of
Yeah.
on their end that all were on the inside. So I think it's the community around us that helps us turn each and every one of our houses into a home. And I think from there, the extension is then the SIL team or whoever is going to be providing support on that site, which for us, the participants always choose. Like the first participant always chooses the SIL provider. So yeah, for us, it's that furnishing and just doing everything we can within our power to turn that house into a home is probably our motto.
So when a seal provider enters into someone's home, it really is on them as well to work on the house's personality to make it feel like a home, because you can do all that stuff perfect, top notch, tick all the boxes. But the way that a person opens their front door and how they feel when they see their support worker, that really is on that seal provider.
100%. And, something I've been talking about for probably at least 6 months now is that I see a lot of the advertising from SIL providers where they're literally just advertising a house. They're showing a floor plan, they're showing the bricks and mortar with, whether it's furnished or it's not furnished. They're not showing the supports that they're actually going to provide in that home. And that, I think, is where participants are being almost, I wouldn't say misled. I think that if they're undereducated with how housing works, they're seeing a care provider advertise a house and just assume everything's going through that care provider. They're not seeing that technically it should be the SDA provider that's doing the advertising of the house. And I think it's actually doing most of those SIL providers a disservice to their own sort of service delivery, because people want to see what you're doing. They want to see you cooking with participants. They want to see you getting out and about. There's some incredible providers and they're just not showing or showcasing the work that they actually do. They're not showing the staff that are actually going to work in those homes. They're not showing, staff out fishing or, taking someone out for dinner or whatever the case is. Then there isn't a lot of that anymore. And that used to very much be what SIL providers always advertised. It was always about the care provision. And I think the one thing that they're advertising is the one thing that's almost a dime a dozen. Most of the houses are pretty similar. There's nothing massively special. Sometimes you'll get a random incredible house, and sometimes you'll get some really average, crappy little dog boxes, I would call them. But the 90% of them are all in that same kind of range of similar sizes, similar land, similar locations. There's nothing inherently special about them. I think that the special part is the inside, whether it's, obviously we can do what we can as an SDA and make it look as pretty and functional and all of that sort of stuff. But it's really that care provision that needs to really be highlighted and celebrated and shown to participants, because otherwise they're just getting, they're kind of getting sucked in by a shiny house that has nothing to do with the care that they're actually going to receive once they move in. And I think we need to be showing that and highlighting that so much more.
You put up a point though I find really wild. I remember a couple of times I would go see a new house, about to open, and you do the welcome day. I found it always really wild when it was the provider. I was like, oh no, no, you don't know all the tricks of this house, my friend. Yes, you live here. Please tell me. And then your tour is completely different. Like it is, because the tour when it's somebody's home, the way that they present their home, and we have this, and the third drawer, Sarah, it's a little bit dodgy. Just be careful if you're trying to get a tea towel out. Like they know all these little tricks. They know all of that
Exactly.
stuff. the provider
Yeah,
doesn't. So it's kind of like, well, just stop with your camera, stop with your mic, hand it over. He's got this. If you want to, like have that extra vacancy filled, this is your person. These are your people. They should really be the ones at the front of it because they're welcoming a person into their home, which is completely different.
exactly. Yeah,
But yeah, I
exactly.
haven't seen marketing like that. I find it wild. Why hasn't anyone done that? Like, have you?
Half the time I feel like we're telling people how great the supports are on site, and it shouldn't be up to us because we shouldn't have a hand in that at all. So,
Yeah,
you
but
know,
have you
that's so
seen
hard.
anyone do it? Like anyone where they've got a participant that lives in that house that is their home, presenting it for somebody to want to come live with them? I have not seen it. I
No,
would
no,
love to
neither.
see that. If there's a person out there that's doing that, please tag me because
Yeah.
I would eat that content up. I'm sorry, I got lost in track of just thinking, why haven't I seen this? There should be done. What is the hardest part about running a business like yours?
I think just trying to be everything to everyone all of the time. I think especially when you're a very self-starter, bootstrapping your business, you are literally the cleaner, you're the marketing, you're, absolutely everything. You're doing the insurance, you're doing the work cover, you're doing super payroll, invoicing, absolutely everything. I think that's probably um you get very, very burnt out very quickly, and unless you can really get it off the ground and start sort of, the first resources that you start putting into is just good staffing to take on a lot of those jobs. And then the second hardest part is letting go of those jobs and knowing that someone else is going to be able to do it as good as you can do. I think that's definitely hard. But yeah, I think just not being burnt out, still trying to show up as good as you can, but making sure you're putting your resources into the right area, which is generally staffing to be able to take on a lot of those jobs so you can do and I guess become more of a visionary rather than someone who's stuck working in the business all of the time.
Yeah, like that's really difficult to pull you. I don't know about you, but I found that at points when it came to my business, stepping away from elements because I'm like, yeah, but no one's gonna love it like Sarah loves it. Like, and I
Exactly.
do enjoy a lot of elements of it, and that letting go part. And then who do I let it go to? And it's like it's more stressful trying to figure out who to hire than it is
Exactly.
just sometimes to do it yourself because I don't know you, but I love what I do, so it's really hard to find somebody that I know is gonna love it as much as me.
Exactly. 100%.
So this is not your first rodeo in the NDIS and in the care sector. What do you think the disability sector has changed since you started? Have you seen any changes? What is the big ones?
I think pre NDIS, there was a lot of stuff that was done well and a lot of stuff that wasn't done well. And I think then post NDIS, it's exactly the same. So I think we're still running those same patterns of not being, only being able to do some things well and only able to do some things badly. I think more choice and control has been obviously amazing for participants and for me in housing to see people be able to build those scaffolds and be able to then potentially move out into even more independence is amazing. And I think that's something we need to be focusing a lot more on. And I think that the funding models aren't supporting that at the moment. But yeah, there's probably a million changes and I've probably forgot more of them than I would even remember. But I think yeah, there's some things that were done very early on that were done well, and some things now that I'm hoping are going to start changing, which will, again, we should be just always learning from the past and trying to strive to do better. And I think that is something that most people would want for the NDIS.
You were able to pick up very quickly the vision the NDIS was going down, jump on an opportunity, and voila, you had 25 houses. Have you got more than 25?
We've got, I think, close to 150 now right across Australia. So yeah, so mostly in Victoria. So
Yeah.
yeah, we definitely ran quickly. But in saying that, we have started offboarding some of those houses too, and starting to be a lot more particular with who we partner with, even from an investment point of view, and our focus is very much where it started. So we very much really started on wanting people with disabilities to own their own home, and the banks just were not on board with that. Luckily, over the last 5-6 years, that's changed, and we've been able to help people with disabilities own their own home, and in some cases, even then purchase an investment property so they have a passive income if they're not able to work. So I think yeah, it's pretty much being able to pivot where you can, and I guess really, if you really believe in something, you will 100% make it work and you'll keep changing it or not changing. If you really believe in something, you won't change. In some cases, you'll just be, this is the right path and that's it. That's what we're following. And in other cases, you'll keep pivoting until you keep getting it right or keep improving, which has always been our thing, is that we can change and we can do things differently as long as we're improving every time we do that.
So you've been able to predict that. What do you predict for the future? So everyone's listening right now, get a pen and paper.
Some of my predictions are more wishes than predictions. Um, I've always been really passionate about that separation of SIL or care provision and housing. And one of the main reasons why I didn't just do this as Wingate, which is what I could have done, was because I didn't, once I sort of went down that rabbit hole, I really believed that we shouldn't be doing the care provision and the housing. So that's something that I've always been really, really passionate about. And I think as we see lots of areas in housing is oversaturated, and lots of different pockets of Australia, and we're seeing care providers just taking on head leases with owners who are desperate and will take 500 $600 a week for a care provider to rent a house. Um, which in some cases I understand it and it's admirable if that's going to help people get housing. But I think it's very short sighted and it's actually taking away choice and control from participants who essentially, if they no longer like that care provider, they are homeless and need to find somewhere else to live. So I would really love to see all housing be split into housing and supports, whether it's straight SIL or ILO, Appendix H, whatever it is. I think it all should come under that specialist disability banner, because I think that care providers should not be, whether they're renting directly or, head leasing, I don't think they should be, because it is taking away that choice and control and it is hamstringing people in the long run. So to me, that's probably one of the biggest things I would love to see. So that's more of a wish. I feel like it's NDIS has been saying it for 9, 10 years now. So I'm hoping that it's somewhere on the horizon that they'll actually legislate it. But yeah, and I would love to see one resident houses, I think, is we have a lot of requests for people to live on their own, which is fantastic, and that should be their choice. But there is no line in the SDA calculator for one resident housing. It's two resident plus. And I would love to see, because not everyone wants to live with other people, but not everyone wants to live by themselves in a villa or apartment. Some people want to live in a house and they want a couple of spare bedrooms for family to come and stay or to work from home or to have a backyard to have a pet. So I'd love to see that change as well.
That would be awesome. Yeah, to have a pet and to be able to have
Yeah.
your own. Like there's been a couple of people that have that are coming to mind that hooray! I've got still funding. This is fantastic. Now I'm going to share a house with another two people. What the?
Yeah.
I don't
Yeah,
want to do that.
exactly.
It's not where I feel comfortable. I don't like the idea of moving into a house of two people I don't know. Like there's that element as well. And if I'm not well protected by my family or, my guardian, God knows where I'll end up.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that the more choices we have for people, the better we are. So I think all of those options are in some cases completely perfect for some people. So we need all as many different options as we can, but I think we need to make sure that the funding matches those choices, because really if they're only given 1 to 3 funding, whether it's SIL or SDA, there's no real choice for them. Like in reality, yes, generally an SDA provider can take that hit of saying, yes, you can live by yourself, but a SIL provider actually loses money. So it's not that they're not making enough. They've got to pay someone to do the supports and pay them a full hourly rate while they're only able to actually then claim a third of an hourly rate. So they're literally hemorrhaging money out the back door. It's not going to work for people. And I think that's probably one of the things that we have been trying to change, is for SIL providers to not go into housing with one participant and no plan for marketing to get more participants, unless that person legitimately is going to live by themselves and they're one-to-one funded. Because again, when people start hemorrhaging money, they start cutting costs. They, take every shortcut. They don't spend money on training staff. There's all these things that start, I guess, for them, they start really compromising good supports because they can't afford to provide good supports. And I think that that's probably one of the biggest things. So I think the NDIS has to look at where they're hamstringing people and where just changing some of those options for people to have more choice will actually have way better outcomes, which is all that most people want. That's all, whether you're a support worker, support coordinator, OT, physio, speechy, SEAL provider, SDA provider, everyone just wants good supports for people and good outcomes for people. So if we can get the NDIS on the same wavelength as the rest of us, I think we'll be okay.
You brought up a topic that was actually quite interesting because I remember probably last year I went to, like one of the big expos in Melbourne, and you walk around and you talk about this, and then you see all the amount of vacancies certain providers had. You're like, God, how's the light still being turned on? Because it doesn't, and then like knowing ratios, knowing rocks myself, and I'll be like, oh, that's not viable. You're not
Yeah,
viable.
no,
Oh God. Like
it's
you start to do that. And I worry that there will be like a mass exit in the market because we've got half empty, like we got houses that are vacant, and we got half emptied in the fact that they can't get another two or three, like, two or one extra person that wants to live in that area in that house. Like I don't know. Like I'm a
yeah,
bit iffy about how it's all going to look in a year's time.
yeah. Yeah, and I think, that kind of introduction of that real KPI centered workload for a lot of like business development managers, and like we back in the day before NDIS, we barely had a business development manager. Like that was not something that was a role. It was care managers, to go out and obviously get referrals from, support coordinators or case managers or from, DHS or wherever they were coming from. And I think that really turning NDIS into that real market, and a very, very competitive market, has changed a lot of the views of people, and we're getting salespeople coming into those roles, not people who have come from care provision. And I think, one thing our team started doing sort of towards the end of last year and the start of this year was to try and get as many of our SIL providers who are working in our houses together to work together to fill some of those vacancies, but not just filling vacancies for vacancy's sake, but more working together to say this, we're not just losing money on this house, it's not working for us. Is there other participants that potentially we could work together and, move two people in together so it's a little bit more viable, and one of us do the SIL and the other one do community access, and having those conversations with participants, because I think choice and control has been amazing, but in some cases that has meant that people who have had no choice and no control have gone in the other direction where they've got so much choice and so much say, which is incredible. But in some cases, they're taking, why would they move in with these two people when they could live down here with them by themselves, with the same care provider that they want, but not realizing that that's putting themselves at risk in a couple of months' time when they're dropped at the hospital because their funding's been exhausted, or the care provider can't make it viable. So it's almost giving people false hope sometimes. And I think those conversations, we have to have those conversations with participants to say that we understand this is your choice and 100% we support that. But here's the actual accountability and the consequences sometimes of those choices, because that's the conversations we're not having.
They can be had. They're not hard. Like they're hard, but they're not hard to have. If that makes any sense, like it's
Yeah,
just communication. It really, it's not
exactly.
a nice feeling to have them. But if you don't have them, like you said, the consequences are quite dire. You could be
Yeah,
living back in hospital, and that's not what we want.
exactly. And it's much easier to have that up front than it is 6 months in to say we've exhausted all your funding, we can't find another participant. Sorry, you're gonna have to move, or you're gonna have to, you know, go into hospital or whatever the case is. Like that's devastating to people. But if they're told, look, if you go ahead with this, this is what could happen. It's still your choice. We can try and find a housemate that suits you. But if that doesn't happen, then this is what we're going to have to do, in that
That's
case,
fair
because
enough.
your funding, yeah, the reality is your funding is this, and this will only go so far. So you need to obviously have those conversations up front to say, yes, we want to support you and want you to have those choices and, make those decisions for yourself. But you have to know that when you make decisions, there is also consequences for decisions, good and bad. Some consequences are that this has been amazing and it's worked really well and everything's great and there's rainbows and unicorns and, everything's dandy. And in some cases, it's absolute pandemonium and devastation and people being dropped at hospitals because there's no funds left, which nobody wants. Nobody wants.
No, but you're right. Nobody wants that. Now I'm sorry, I'm a little bit off topic, but I realize there's a question that I haven't asked you, and I feel like it's very important to ask you. you're a part of the Chamber of Commerce. Like, you've got disability and then you've got the Chamber of Commerce. How did this line up? Like, how did you connect the 2 and why?
So when I first moved back to my hometown, that has a small chamber of commerce that's been going for, 45, 50 years. And as a small business owner, I was kind of asked to come along. I really liked what they were about and how they were supporting, obviously small business owners. From there, I ended up, I think, a year or so in, I ended up on the committee and then eventually kind of up to vice president and then president. And I think what I found was during COVID, it very much, just like everything else, fell away. The momentum that we'd had in that group of, business owners who were supporting each other and promoting each other and referring people to each other just kind of disappeared. A lot of businesses went under over that period. And it's been unfortunate that those smaller, small town chamber of commerces have started to kind of go under or not be as successful. And something that I have actually been thinking of probably over the last, I'd say probably year and a half. And I've had some conversations with, like your James Lovedays and your Belinda Tui's and Andrew from Raya around, could we start a chamber of commerce that is actually community service, so it's supporting businesses. It's a very different, I guess, not coming from a provider running a networking, or it's very separate, and it would have almost, people on a committee that are from different providers with different views and different kind of networks. So I think that's something that I was quite passionate about, probably pre-COVID, I would say. And then it sort of, as every, a lot of things changed over that period of time for many, many businesses. But I think for me, I'm very passionate about the community service sector and the businesses within that, rather than just passionate about business in general. Because I think our sector is quite unique because we are very human focused, and there is a lot of, there is a lot of charitable people, volunteers. It's not just about money for 99% of us. And I think that that support and mentorship could come from that Chamber of Commerce. And I think that's something I would probably like to look, spend a bit more time over the next couple of years seeing how we could make that work.
Yeah, sorry, you just well, there's a lot there because I know I don't follow the question, but I couldn't help myself as you were discussing that. Is there a female leader in this sector that you look up to?
Oh, I think there's lots of them, but I think Belinda would be one of them.
She's
Um,
she's annoyingly fantastic, isn't she?
she's
The wealth of
unbelievable.
knowledge.
Yeah, just an absolute wealth of knowledge. I can't even think of many others off the top of my head. Probably, as I said, more ones from my past. A lot of the old kind of Anecto and Melbourne City Mission team leaders that I'd worked with when I was really young. So one I've actually just hired for us, which is Pam Hill, who at the time, I
Yeah.
think was an ops manager at Anecto, and we've always sort of kept in touch. And we were really, really lucky to be able to secure Pam to come onto our team earlier this year. So, but yeah, there's been so many over the years, and so many, business leaders, business coaches, people who have supported me and pushed me forward, given me a bit of a slap or a kick up the bum when I've been too much of a sook and needed to harden up. And then others who have been like, okay, you actually need to stop hardening up now. You need to settle yourself down and look after yourself. So, yeah, there's just
Yeah.
so many. But I'd say within the sector, Belinda's definitely one that always has stood out to me for the last couple of years. So, she's incredible.
So a lot of people would look at your business story and be in awe because you've started from one house and you've got 150 now. What advice would you give to any new providers getting into the sector?
I would just say be passionate. Do not get into it for money, because you will absolutely drown yourself in self-pity. I think if you actually looked at the bottom line most of the time, be passionate, care about your participants, and always have that disability lens over whatever you're doing, if that's the space you're going to be in. Um, Lived experience is obviously something that I always value very, very highly. But at the same time, you don't know what you don't know. So lived experience combined with education and training and qualifications is something I'm quite passionate about, because while people without lived experience can learn things out of a book and pick it up and learn on the job, the flip side is you may have lived something, but everyone's experience is different, and you need to still learn those legal and ethical frameworks and unconditional positive regard and all of those kind of things you need to learn to be a really, really good leader in this sector. And I think just love what you do, because I think if you don't, you burn out very, very quickly. And I'm already seeing that with providers that have only been in the space for a year or two. There's no longevity in them because they didn't get into the space for the right reasons. So just always, yeah, for the right reasons.
What do you wish you knew from the beginning when you opened up your business?
Probably that a business is a giant sieve that money just flows out of all of the time. Like,
You've got to
okay,
be
if you're
okay with
doing it,
losing, okay?
yeah, yeah. If you're doing it for money, it's definitely not the smartest thing to do it for. But also that if you love what you do and you wear your heart on your sleeve, people will see that and people will follow you, and you will get you know, a weird, almost cult-like following of staff members who just love what you do. And I think that's if I knew that 20 odd years ago when I was starting out in business, I would have spent way more time trying to build that culture in my first business that now luckily I've been able to in this business, because I think that culture is what every participant, every family member, every other service provider follows that culture. And I think if they see you are genuine, that you are honest, that you wear your heart on your sleeve, then they will naturally just have pretty much the vibe that you're going for. So I think that vibe attracts your tribe is 100% true. But yeah, that's pretty much that you will be on the brink of bankruptcy every couple of years and you'll somehow fight your way out of it again. And you'll spend your resources on people that you hopefully love and appreciate and support, and that will do the most amazing job for your participants, and to very, very much focus on them and nurture them and appreciate them. I think that's probably the biggest thing for me.
What's one message you want support workers and providers to get from you today?
I'm going to go from a housing perspective. The houses you are working in, yes, they are workplaces and they need to be safe and they need to very much accommodate you, but they are a participant's home. And I think taking some of the old school approach of home care, when people literally used to just go in and work in people's homes and didn't worry about every sign up on the wall, and what people had in their home was almost none of your business. I think that needs to come back a little bit. I see some providers telling participants they can't put pictures up in their room, and trying to dictate how the house is and how people live. And I think that there needs to be more compassion and empathy when you're walking into people's homes, and to remember that, and to not, and again, this is from the old support worker days, not standing around bagging your participants right in front of them thinking that they can't understand what you're saying. I think just be a human. Just be a human. Like, I think that's probably the biggest thing. Be a human, remember why you're there. And
I do find that insane, to be honest with you. Not to you as an individual, you live in this house, which is, we talk about it, we deem it as your home. You go into your bedroom and you can't have a picture up. Like, fuck me. Like,
yeah,
I,
yeah,
yeah, yeah. It's sometimes it feels like it's like a backward step. I'm like, is this like like a mini institution, or am I getting to live in a house that I can deem as my home and be comfortable? I should have
yeah,
this
yeah. And I
pretty
get it.
bad.
Yeah, exactly. And I get it from, most providers that I work with. I deal with the middle managers, or the higher up managers, and they talk a great talk. Like, they believe, I think, a lot of the time, that they're providing the supports that they truly want to provide. But they don't see, and I know this from personal experience, they don't see the support staff very often. They're not in there working with them. So they can't build that culture in each house. It's a huge job, and I 100% get it. So I'm not blaming organizations. I think individuals really need to take accountability for themselves. And again, be a human. Don't be a dickhead if you're working in people's houses. That's just my 100%.
Yep.
Just don't be a
Um,
dickhead.
it just exploded the NDIS when it got rolled out, and then the workforce. It felt like it didn't come with the workforce. So it's like, right, we've got all these career opportunities. This is fantastic, but all the people that had started pre NDIS are all in management roles now. They are
Yes.
managing services, so they're not on the ground getting their hands dirty like we used to, because we're in positions now that we've had to take that step up because we just exploded.
Exactly. And there's been such because there has been such a shortfall in direct care workers, the government's response to that is to give people free courses to get them into the sector. And there are the people who have been in other, I guess, sectors that have gone under over COVID, or they've been people newly arriving to the country and they're going into this sector because there's nowhere else for them to go. So there's no passion. There used to be, as much as, I would say a lot of the not for profits and the charitable and the religious providers, I've never been a massive fan of. But I think the one thing that they did bring is that most people working for them genuinely loved the people that they were working with. And there was that charitable mindset of they would do this if they weren't getting paid. And let's be honest, they were getting paid pittance back in the day. So
Yep.
because the pay rates, it's amazing now, some of the wages for support workers. So people are coming into the sector. They literally support work, and I never thought I'd say this. Support workers are coming into the sector for money, and they've not got the mentality, the just inherent care factor. They don't have the right. Just they don't have the right stuff to be working in this sector, and I think they're treating people like they're working at Woolies or Coles or in a factory, and it's not going to work. And we need to weed those people out. I know that there's a shortage in the sector, but I think if you're going to take people from a sector into ours, they need to come from hospitality and places where they used to being bubbly, friendly, talking to people, not just grumbling along
Willing to
and putting
serve.
people on
Willing
above.
to serve
Yes.
and wanting to
Yeah.
serve. And that is the
Absolutely.
one desire. And to be able to
Yeah.
skill build somebody with a to have more
Exactly.
opportunity. It's wild you say that, because I was actually talking to this about this topic the other day, going, is this just a good support worker or are you an advocate? Because we'll go into a story, why not? Back in the day, I was providing care to a person that had a visual impairment, and we turned up to the pub that this person absolutely loved. It was time to go to the bathroom, and I needed to make sure that I placed this person to assist them to the disability bathroom. I open up the door, and there's cleaning products and shit everywhere. And I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
what do I do? So then, like, because this person can independently go to the bathroom. So you align this person up to a system because there's all shit everywhere to go to the bathroom. But then that was that icky feeling, because I'm like, oh my God, I am in the bathroom and I don't need to be in this bathroom right now. I don't need to witness what is happening in this bathroom. This, because of what's happening in the bathroom right now, it means that, we're denying this person an opportunity to be independent as possible because they can do everything. It's just that this bathroom is not safe. So
Yeah.
then,
Yeah.
once that person did their business, but, out we go. That day I went home and sent that pub an email saying, right, like, you've denied this person an opportunity to go to the bathroom in peace and be respectful, blah, blah, blah. And then the next week, when we went back to that pub, it had changed. I was saying to
Amazing.
I was saying to a friend, I'm like, well, no, I just thought I'd never put that as an advocacy thing. I thought that was just a support worker thing because this wasn't right and this didn't feel right. I didn't feel right about it. It's a barrier. It's a barrier because this person loves this pub and we would like to continue to go to the pub. My job now is to educate the community that, we all have a right to go to the pub in the best way possible. So there is that shift in the dynamic of what a support worker looks like and how do you label it. And I don't see myself as an advocate. Yeah. I see myself as a support worker just doing their fucking job.
Yeah. Yeah.
I
And I
don't
think that
know.
right
Like,
there,
it's
yeah. Yeah, that right there is also, I think, why I went into housing as well, because I think sometimes the actual physical environment, as you just said, can help someone be more independent and need less support. And that's not about funding. Like, I couldn't give a shit about the funding side of it. I give a shit about the person being able to build that scaffold and be more independent and being able to do more things for themselves because the physical environment around them supports that, and that we should be continuing to keep improving on those environments to make sure that people keep being able to support themselves in that way and be able to move environments as they get more independent. I think that's kind of something that we're not focusing enough on.
That skill building. To be at home is a skill build. That is like those activities of daily living at home. We don't need to do
Exactly.
as much as, like, it sounds silly, but you do, but you don't do as much because the aim is
Yeah.
to support somebody to do it as independent as possible. You're a
Yeah.
guide, you inform, but you don't do it for them. Because there was this element somewhere in the line of the NDIS, it got lost. That apparently I was meant to do everything. Like, and when I say apparently meant to do everything, that element of supporting somebody and teaching them to be as independent as possible, that lost its notion somewhere. And
Yeah. Yeah,
it's like we're
exactly.
still trying to gain that traction to bring it back up again. Hold on one moment. It's to be as independent as possible. Very difficult to
Exactly.
do. Now,
Yeah, exactly.
to find you, to be in your, like, around and surround, if I wanted to say anyone watching this wanted to be employed by you, or anybody looking to have housing options through you, what is the best way to get in contact with the company?
So website is obviously one way. So our empoweredlivability.com.au website. Phone number 1300 974 912. But most of our team, if you just type in Empowered Livability on LinkedIn or Facebook or any of, social media, they're pretty, our presence is pretty high up there. Most of the NDIS groups we're in, and most of us are kind of mentors in those groups and answering questions. People who need support. And we try and run, webinars and lunch and learns for support coordinators as well, and trainings, especially on some of the areas that are a bit newer and a little bit more nuanced, like Appendix H for families to be able to live together and things like that. So yeah, otherwise, on LinkedIn, people can add me, Nicole Macon Doherty, anywhere, Google, wherever, you'll find us.
Besides all that, you are actually being a sponsor at a upcoming event in our sector.
Yes, yes. The Disability Awards, which are coming up in November, we've tried, I guess, we've won quite a few of awards over the last few years. And we've tried, I guess, since then to not so much nominate ourselves, but to become sponsors and make sure that those awards are highlighting really good services and good people within the sector. So we're sponsoring the Support Coordination Award. So there's some amazing support coordinators in that and support coordination companies. But I think it's important, once you've kind of I feel like once you've won something or you've been nominated for something that, you should sort of look at nominating other people or, sponsoring awards and things like that. So we've tried to do that over the last few years.
So that you get to do that now.
Exactly. It's amazing.
Well, thank you so much for joining me on this podcast and, taking the time
Thank
to
you.
answer quite a lot of questions, because I really did. I hope I didn't tire around you too much, but thank you so
No,
much for tonight.
thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
All right, too easy. Bye for now.